You are consuming this experience and this performance and this art, even if they're just screaming some crazy stuff into a microphone together. Even if it's silly, even if it's not some serious, orchestral moment. And being able to have that shared experience and look around and see who's having that with you is something super special. And I think it's just really important. And I know not everybody's into live music. Everybody's kind of into live music. They just don't know it. But they just got to find the right thing.
Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary.
Well, welcome back to the Hidden City Podcast. We're excited to have Diana Cox here with us today. She is the Vice President of Kessler Presents, and she's an Elmwood resident over here in Oak Cliff. So good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about the Kessler. I mean, it's a theater that it's been like a jewel in Oak Cliff, but you've started at it in 2013?
I joined the company in 2013.
Okay, cool.
So the Kessler itself obviously is a historic venue.
Yeah, it is.
It's in the National Historic Registry. It's a landmark for Oak Cliff as a neighborhood in general. And I'll do the short version of the building history because I feel like that's always fun to share. Is that it opened in 1941 as a movie house, and that was important in the movie house era in America. And then shortly after World War II, like a lot of movie houses, it closed. Yeah. Well, it was a movie house. Gene Autry was one of the owners, if you want to sing Cowboy.
Nice. Okay.
But it was used as a revivalist church for many years. Shortly after the World War II ended and the movie theater shut down, it was hit by the tornado of 1957.
Yeah. Okay.
So there is some really cool photos out there, not to say that about destruction that harmed people and property, but it was one of the first times there was really good aerial photography of tornado damage. And if you're at the Kessler Theater ever, if you look at the back wall that faces 7th Street, you can see the cutout of where the tornado cut through the building.
No, I did not know that.
So next time you're out at the venue, if you just go on like the green space that we have out there and you look up, you can see just like the discolored brick. The brick's a different color.
I've never noticed that. Yeah. I'll have to go look for it.
Yeah, I mean that tornado was like. I feel like a lot of people have stories with that too, and where it
that
came
might have to be
down
a story or an episode at some point. For the show.
Easy.
But.
So when you're on the green space, you're saying in the back, and you look up, you can see
You can see the line in the brick where the new brick replaced the old where it cut into the building. But it was it suffered a fire in the that was 57. Suffered a fire in the 60s, and then obviously it opened as the Kessler Theater, the music venue, as we all know and love today, in 2010.
Awesome.
I joined the team in 2013.
Okay.
So not terribly long after after they opened up, but a little bit now.
That's pretty quick after it got restarted, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it is an iconic place. I think of Texas Theater, I think of Kessler right up there with it. And it's my favorite place to go see a show. I just am obsessed with it. We've seen, you and I have seen so many good shows there together.
What did we see? We saw Black Pumas, Balmaray. We got to see
John Baptiste. You saw John Baptiste and gave him a high five in the middle of the floor. It was a crazy moment in time.
He had the piano right in the middle of. We could go on forever. It's
Watch House. Oh, man, that was a good show too. Yeah, so many good ones.
It's when people are coming in or they're like visiting or they're here for a little bit of time, it's just like, man, see if there's something there because it's worth catching. It's special because it's not too big. It's like you feel intimate in it and it feels special.
It is special, and there's different layouts you can have. It's just a fun place to see a show. So
thanks. Honestly, y'all keep talking about the Kessler
Theater.
What
drew you there? Like how did that first kind of come about?
I kind of got there accident, but I think we end up where we are supposed to be. So I'll say that.
Yeah.
I was, at the time that I started with the company, I was an officer in the Texas Army National Guard, and was teaching Texas government at Tarrant County College.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I had two pretty different part-time things I was doing. Yeah. And I was doing event coordination with a good friend of mine as we were freelancing. Yeah. She ended up leaving the Dallas area and was like, Diana should stick around. And from there, I started working at the Kessler.
Wow.
Okay. That's
so
the story.
Some of the events you said?
So I started out doing some of the private event work and some of the office administration.
Cool.
And then fast forward 10 years after that, and I've, a lot of growth and two additional venues, 3 new cities, lots of stuff in the meantime.
That's a really good thing to explain, I think, because Kessler Presents is more than just the Kessler Theater.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that entails?
Yeah, so in 2016, we added the Heights Theater in Houston to our portfolio,
another
if you will.
iconic place,
And it's another historic theater in the Heights neighborhood of Houston. And it's interestingly because it's actually older than the Kessler as a structure. It goes back to the 20s, but it's laid out slightly different, but we made it very similar. But we get a lot of the same shows. It's slightly larger, but it's a lot of the same bands. So if they're coming from Dallas, oh, by the way, you want to play Houston too, it works out really well.
I remember Edwin kind of sharing this. Is it, I'm going to butcher it, maybe a troubadour circuit, or is that something like he had some history there?
Yeah,
he was
the Southern Roots circuit is kind of like what he was talking about.
Okay.
And so, there's a lot of historical circuits in roots music that people talk about. But conceptually, when a band's planning, any small band even, when they're planning a route or booking their tour, they're looking at geography of what cities they need to play in. Yeah. What makes sense in each city? Who can they play with? There's a lot of components there in not only the logistics, but the room that makes sense for them. Yeah. The size of the room matters, and the style.
Geography makes sense. Like the location. We were just hanging out with some friends in California, and their Nashville musician was out there performing, and they were just like, "Why don't you ever come over here tour-wise?" And he's like, "They just never sometimes come over that, like those mountains."
It's a long route.
Well, it is. Yeah, it makes sense. But anyways,
Well, it totally makes sense to the idea of like, hey, we have this theater, but you might also be interested in booking these other ones. Like, it's a one-stop.
Awesome.
Becomes a one-stop shop.
Smart.
And we present shows in Austin as well. We started doing that in 2018 with. We don't have our own venue there. Like we have our lovely historical theaters that are converted into listening room style venues, but we have great partners in Austin. Yeah. So we've got a couple of several venues we work with down there. But it kind of adds another little opportunity for artists, but also for us to work with artists.
Cool. That's awesome. So you can be like, hey, let's go to Dallas, Houston, Austin. Any others currently?
No. And then when they get too big for the Kessler, they can go play the Longhorn Ballroom.
Yes. Well,
which
tell
is
people
another
about
fun
the
one.
Longhorn. I feel like that is such a exciting new thing that's been happening. Yeah, like what's that picture?
So, what's cool is that all of our venues are historic. The Longhorn Ballroom's a little different because the Kessler and the Heights are historic theaters that we turned into listening rooms. Yeah. Longhorn Ballroom has always been a music venue, basically, since 1950 when it was built. I'll do my brief history on this one, too, because I think it's fun.
We love history.
So it was built in 1950 as Bob Will's Ranch House by O.L. Nelms, which is a famous developer in Dallas. Also built Yellow Belly Drag Strip, if you're into that side of the world.
Wow.
But like a lot of musician types are not always the best business people on their own. It ended up not being the most successful endeavor, even though good old Bob Wills was up on that stage with his horse Pumpkin.
With his what?
On stage with his horse Pumpkin. Oh, yeah.
There's my goodness. That's awesome.
We have the saddle.
I need
go check out
to see these photos.
Yeah.
But Jack Ruby managed the space briefly. Jack Ruby, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
talk about history.
Yeah. And, everybody from, Nat King Cole was playing there in the 50s on what they would call service industry nights and sin nights, which were typically at that time really catering to the African-American audience in Dallas, because where the Longhorn Ballroom is unincorporated. Well, it is now, but back then it was unincorporated.
Right.
So it's a little different. But
right by the Trinity River.
It's on Rock Island, which just sounds cool too.
Yeah, Rock Island. That is good. Wait, what's the name of that? Like, what? It's called Rock Island? Like, tell me about that.
There's a Rock Island train line there, and then the road over there is Rock Island. Like, it's a little industrial area because it's part of the...
It is a very unique area for those that are listening and haven't been by it. Go drive by it.
Yeah.
It's like a very interesting little part of our city.
Yeah, it's the edge of the Cedars neighborhood.
Yeah.
Some people might say it's Oak Cliff. I will tell you, unfortunately, we can't fully claim it.
It's past the river. It's past the river. Yeah.
But and so Dewey Groom took over the space and renamed it, made it the iconic Longhorn Ballroom that we know today. Did tons of famous shows there through the 60s, 70s, and then it was changing hands in the 80s a few times. But the iconic marquee is from 1978.
I know.
January 1978, when it was the Sex Pistols and Merle Haggard in the same week.
Yeah,
So-
Talk about iconic. Yeah.
I remember I lived at Southside for a little while, and I would just drive by and see that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And that big old Longhorn up there too.
Oh yeah.
It's it's iconic.
Yeah.
It's cool that it's getting love and getting
and it's being used again the way it was always used, which is
I
think a cool part of the vision of Kessler Presents.
Yeah.
Is this like restoration sort of
huge part
side of it.
Yeah, we're presenting music and events, but it's a gathering space and it's a preservation. Because can you go bulldoze and build a brand new venue? Sure you can.
Yeah.
Sure, people do it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's saying you can't. But I'll tell you for myself, when I walked into the Longhorn Ballroom, I'd been to a show there once in the late aughts.
Oh, cool.
I'm not one of those people that can claim I went to all these amazing iconic shows in the 90s I know and before that I know people have been to. But just going in there, even when it was had been vacant for about 2 years, so it was in a bit of disrepair.
Yeah.
You just feel the soul in a building like that sometimes, It just feels special. I mean, y'all work in an older building, so that's been renovated.
Know what you mean. Yes, there's character.
No, there's some pains in the whatever about old buildings too.
Oh, yeah.
But
for sure.
They can be a pain in the ass.
There's a lot of problems with old buildings. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Like a water pipe just bursting. You're like, what's this? Why is this so flooded?
Well, that pipe hasn't been changed in 100 years. That's okay. We'll fix that
Surprise.
one. Yeah.
Like, the pipe. They went that direction?
Yeah. What?
What?
Yeah,
things like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
That's
makes it fun.
I do feel like that's a good problem, and that's something that Oak Cliff does well, or by the Trinity River, like all that. It's just like, don't bulldoze some of these things. You could have wiped this out.
And Dallas loves to wipe them out.
Dallas has a rep for that.
Yeah, 100%.
But you guys are doing this work to bring it back together in that. Yeah. It's so awesome. So
we were able to reopen though. So that's the exciting part, I guess, is we were able to reopen last year. So Longhorn Ballroom is open and operating and putting on concerts and events, and
cool.
and then we're getting ready to. Prepping, which is still some things to be finished, but to move tenants into the mixed-use buildings. There is a separate building. Looks like an old motel on site, but that'll have some tenants, and then hopefully sometime next year or year after, over a period of 12 months from now.
We'll say the future.
We'll say that to have the outdoor amphitheater opening on the backyard.
Yeah, that's awesome. How integral are you in kind of that design process? Or are you just like, hey, you guys are doing your thing, and I'm gonna start on some of the more programming side of this stuff in the future, or what?
I actually kind of am in the middle on that. I'm more operations side of things. I do get to help. I consume a lot of music. So I go see a lot of bands. It's just something I've done since I was a teenager, and so I try to kind of have an idea of what's going on out there. But I'm not a primary booking person, and I'm not the designer. But I know logistics and operations.
Live in this world.
As former director of operations, now vice president, you probably are touching all sides of the whole thing. I would think. I'm
kind of trying to keep things running, keep everybody keep communications in play. I have another person was promoted into the director of operations role on my team. So Allison handles that herding of cats and organization. But we're a small business still. I mean, at the end of the day, but really seeing what's happening on the day to day and keeping those things moving along and kind of assessing and figuring out what's next is kind of my spot now.
Seems like a fun role. Tell us, you joined in 2013. Yeah. What was the early days? Because that was still some of the early days of the Kessler. What was that like?
It was. Oh man. It was. it was kind of a little looser than we are today. I'll say that.
Sure, yeah.
You know,
as any
as a
good
business
small
grows,
business is, yeah.
You know, I think you don't know what you don't know sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, and then the music industry changes over time too, as far as resources. When I say that, I mean like software.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that sounds silly, but
you work.
the things that we use on a daily basis now that didn't exist, or that bands didn't care about, or things like that. So we're constantly having to follow those kind of, you know, update for that kind of stuff. But I think that, you know, as far as how we've changed, we've grown a lot.
Yeah.
We've had to add a lot of people when you add from then to now, when you have 2 more venues, you have a lot more people than you did from that time. And I think just the volume that we do between everything, that's just so much more, and just trying to keep track. Like I used to be able, you know, I joke talk about me, but not just the venue, but I was like, people are like, oh, what's coming up? I'm like, here's the calendar for the next 30 days off the top of my head. Yeah. Now people are like, oh, what's coming this weekend? I'm like, which venue? I have no idea. Hold on.
What are you talking about?
Let me pull up a website. Hold on a minute. Was that last week or this week? I don't know. It's too many shows.
It's gone.
It's a good problem.
Yeah. How many shows are we talking at, like the Kessler, for instance, on an annual basis, if you had to ballpark it?
A couple hundred. I mean, I'd say, you know, shows and events combined, you know, across everything, shows, private events, everything. We're talking about almost 500 events a year.
My goodness, that's amazing.
So it's a lot.
Yeah.
What's the team? I'm trying to think of how big the team is. Like you said, you've grown from that smaller group to now, like, I mean, it's multi-site, it's multi-location.
Well, each venue has their own team, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a venue team, we've got a GM, someone that oversees production and oversees bar and hospitality at each venue, and then we have what you know, our organizational team, and you've got, you know, marketing, you know, we've got a senior director of marketing and events. She's got an events person and marketing person with her. We've got a couple talent buyers. We've got Edwin, of course, myself, and operations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Ticketing.
Oh my goodness,
it's a team, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions we were wanting to ask is, like, in the Dallas music scene, is there a turning point that the Kessler had, or a moment where it's just like, you know, this has arrived in this Dallas scene a little bit?
You know, I think that's hard to say that there's a moment of that. I think it evolves. And I think that longevity for a venue is what helps to establish that. And that's not to knock any venues that haven't been able to stand the test of time. But as someone, like I said, I go to venues, and personally, like, I'm not a big concert person, and so I work at the right size venues for that.
Like big as in
large,
massive venue,
like massive venue size. I've been to like one concert. I've been to 2 concerts at American Airlines Center, and I'm like, lovely place.
That's great
go
for
Mass,
everyone
but I'm
like,
but like, go Mass. That's just not where I want to go see a concert.
Yeah,
and
understandable.
so when you look at like a venue of that size, you know, we're put in an interesting spot when you look at so many great venues in Dallas, you know, from Trees to Granada to smaller rooms like, you know, Three Links and things. You know, we've got all of these, but Kessler, I think, provides a different experience, and I think establishing itself by doing super indie and local bands, and that was before me even, before I joined the team. I think that really kind of helped solidify the trust, and some of our team members that were involved kind of helped solidify that trust with the music community. And then once you've solidified that, then you can build the public trust of it in the neighborhood. We're a little bit of a destination, but the neighborhood grew up around us too. And that's not, I won't take all the credit. I don't think our venue takes all the credit. But when you look at that section of Davis, because we're not Bishop Arts, but if you look at that section of Davis Street, there's so many more shops and restaurants today than there were 5 years ago, and way more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting, you know, evolution, and helps to grow what we do. You know, we take the trust of our patrons very seriously, and I think we've earned that. And a lot of our patrons kind of like, we get shows, like we had a show the other night where it was almost everybody there had never been there before, which is cool.
Wow.
It's cool.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of shows where it's like our staff knows them by name as they come in the door.
That's pretty awesome. The neighbors. The neighbors that
I would imagine
a
lot of them are walking there too.
Yeah.
Like
we get a lot of that, but it's also just turns into, you know, I think becoming a space where artist and patron experience is critical for us, and that's part of our ethos. It's something we say publicly. it's not just about the patrons having a good time and a good experience in a venue that feels clean, where they feel safe, where they feel like they can sit and enjoy the show, and the bathroom's not gross, and like all the things, and they're not getting reamed for the beer they buy, whatever, all those things. And then the artist also has a room where they're treated fairly, they're welcomed, the sound is good, their fans have a good experience, because that's a trust build too, because I assure you, there's a relationship between artist and fans outside of this, our place.
You're like a steward of that to an extent. So,
That's a really interesting point, thinking about the sound even just sounding good will affect the way the artist and the fan experience together, that trust continues or not. That's interesting.
Well, I joke with people, so I've had a band before, and I've played music, but I got to play at the Kessler a couple times.
Oh, wow,
and,
that's awesome.
Not for public, not for big shows, but I get to play there. But I was like,
that's a bucket list item.
Dang! I was like, oh, it does feel good up here. It sounds really good up here. Okay, now I get it now. Yeah. And other people that don't typically play our room that have gotten to are kind of like, oh, okay, now I get it.
That's funny.
But so
that's awesome.
Oh, that's very neat.
Well, I mean, another thing that's come to mind too is how did you guys kind of adapt during the pandemic? We've been hearing some of these stories too, and I'm sure that was something that needed to happen. What kind of what did that look like for the Kessler?
Well, obviously we had to close. You know what I mean? That was not an option. There was a period of time where all public gatherings were not happening. I think like everybody, we were like, cool, we'll just reschedule everything for 3-4 weeks out, and it'll be fine. That obviously is not how things worked out.
Right.
We did what I called at the time calendar Tetris, because what else could that's what just try to shuffle, and what can we move this to, and but we did what we could to try to have some we had some false where you think things are going to start and then not, but we had to figure out what we could do instead of focusing on what we couldn't. We were able to retain some of our team. A lot of people that work in our kind of business, though, are independent contractors. You know what I mean? They're shift workers and stuff. So we did our best to support them. Did some fundraising. Did some work. Edwin Cabanis, our owner and founder specifically, and I helped support working on some legislation, the Save Our Stages Act. We were involved in the process behind the scenes on some of that.
Cool. I remember.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was a federal grant program through the SBA, part of the CARES Act, that helped provide funding to music venues, independent theaters, museums, and zoos that helped offset the costs of being closed. But we were, we laugh a little bit now because, I mean, what else can you do?
Exactly.
But we had this green area behind the venue. We'd always talked about we should do something with this, and we never had. And then we had a stage built and put some picnic tables and did some free outdoor concerts out there.
Yes.
We sat and we had our office. We'd already started outgrowing our office, and we were optimistic about the future. So we realized, hey, let's move into this building that we own, that's vacant, that's on our property, and let's move our offices there. And instead of paying our contractors to do whatever kind of work, let's see if anyone on our team wants to come paint the building. I don't know. Whatever. So just trying to figure things out. And then we were watching what people in the industry were doing, and then we were getting this pod scenario, and down on the floor, like crawling around on the floor with masks on, with measuring tape, figuring out what our cap would be. Like that. That was our moment. That was our moment. For
I
a
love
while.
the Kessler on the Green pivot, because I think that was so good for the neighborhood too. It gave people an opportunity to do something.
Yeah, and well, at that just the way things worked out, right when we were opening, that was when we started doing shows inside again.
Yeah.
But just the timing and how it goes.
Yeah.
But it kind of worked nicely, I think, because it gave an alternative, because not everybody had different things that they were wanting or comfortable doing.
Yeah.
But also, like, some of these artists hadn't worked, and we're like, oh, that's real tough if you're a working artist.
Yeah.
So, it was a nice opportunity to get some folks that maybe we hadn't had an opportunity to book at the venue to play out there. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
In maybe not more importantly, but during the pandemic, you started a podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah, not related to this.
Not related.
Not related to my day work. Yeah,
No, but to you.
Myself and my friend Liz have a podcast.
Yes.
So while we're on a podcast, talk about a podcast called Devil's Trap Podcast about the TV show Supernatural. It's a rewatch podcast about the show, and
That's awesome.
we're just barely halfway through the series, but it's super fun. It's a nice. My co-host, my friend, she lives in San Antonio area,
Oh,
so
okay.
we're not local,
Nice.
so we do it remote. So it's kind of cool, also like keeping up with people, like especially during the pandemic, it was a nice way to do it. But also now, still even because like you're out of town friends, like what you text, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But like now it's always like, well, the first 30 minutes we sit down, we're just catching
You're just
up, even though we
talking.
texted a week,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're like, it's like you're sitting talking to your
Yes.
friend, and
Yeah.
then you talk about something specific.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love it. We'll have to put it in the show notes if
Yeah.
we
Oh
can
my
figure out
gosh,
how to
yeah.
do that. But
We'll talk to Jason
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. We'll figure it out.
that's a good idea.
No, it's fun.
So coming out of the pandemic, shows get started again. Tell us about how things have progressed over the last few years for Kessler Presents, and particularly, I think about the Kessler and its balance between bringing in local talent and also some national names that are super well known.
Yeah.
How do you guys balance those two things? And what's like really the proper mix? Yeah, sorry.
No,
I'm jumping
it's
with
fine.
the second question,
You're
but
good. You're good.
Yeah.
No, I think it's important that we. I mean, both are important, right?
Yeah.
And they're important in different ways. I would say that the mix is somewhat dictated by the touring.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
it depends. We don't get to determine when an artist is routing and an artist is routing.
right,
per se.
right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it there's certain times of year we know that are going to be the key times where, like October, November, busy tour times.
Yeah.
That's why everybody's trying to save money for concert tickets right now. That's
Yes, exactly.
everybody's like, how many shows are there tonight I
Yeah.
want to go to? Like
Yeah.
at least that's how I am. I'm like,
Yeah.
crap, there's 3 concerts on Friday. Can I see the opener at this one and the headliner at that
Yeah.
one? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
I'm doing that
Nice.
math. But I think that's a great problem. And then getting to break upcoming artists and then local artists, or just continuing to support locals, is so key to what we do, because if you don't grow the next generation, what's going to happen, right? And if we don't support our local artists, what's next for them? We want to have the artist that opens a show at the Kessler
Yes,
first, then
yeah.
headlines the Kessler, then opens at the Longhorn, then headlines at the Longhorn,
awesome.
and that progression, and then eventually gets to go play on the amphitheater stage when in a
Yeah.
year. So that's what we're looking at full
Yeah,
picture in
that's
in a
cool.
development concept. So yeah.
What I mean, speaking of local, like Oak Cliff music scene, even like, is there things we should know about, or like when you're looking at that,
Yeah.
like how do you find some of this or how does you and your team, I guess?
Yeah, like I get to, like I said, I help some with the
Yeah, totally.
especially the opener side.
Yeah.
I get to have some little say so there sometimes. I try to hesitate a little bit, and I know this is the theme here is Oak Cliff, but to go
Yeah.
only Oak Cliff.
No,
in this,
that's great. That's great.
I do think that Dallas and larger Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, but Dallas specifically has an insanely strong music scene.
Yeah.
And I think Fort Worth is leveraging it, and I'm not trying to. And Dallas is now starting to, which is super exciting.
Okay.
I think we finally got a grasp. There's the Dallas Music Office exists now, which is cool. It's part of Visit Dallas, and so we are officially a music-friendly city according to the state of Texas. So there's cool things coming from that. We had people coming out of the pandemic that just said like, oh, there's no more music. Dallas Observer stopped doing music awards. Central Track's gone. There's not a Dallas Music Awards. So they started the Dallas Entertainment Awards on their own and launched that with other artists. Like, there's so much strength, I think, in the Dallas music scene. And I try to, keep a general awareness of what's happening in my hyper local neighborhood.
Sure.
But also, I think, we're so able to find some of it on accident, because sometimes when I find out an artist from Oak Cliff, it's not because I found them in Oak Cliff.
Yeah.
That's
They happen to live in Oak Cliff and I heard them
and
elsewhere.
I'm like, oh, me too,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of part of it. Or they're from here, and I think that Dallas, Oak Cliff specifically, has such a cool community of artists.
Yeah.
You find out all the time, like everything from backing musicians to people that are, they just grew up here and or whatever it might be. There's so many in Oak Cliff, and I stumble upon them more than anything.
I mean, there's such a rich history of musicians. You've got T-Bone Walker, you've got Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course. These are like the iconic ones, but like there's been a million awesome artists that have come out of this area. So I just love that that's part of the DNA of this hidden city that we live in. Yeah. And there are a lot of people that are still up and coming around here, I feel like.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it's part of what I love about the neighborhood too. I think that it's just really cool that it's such an artistic area, but also like it's like normal life. I don't know.
Yeah. It's sometimes going to be small town kind of feeling, or like it's hilarious. It's like, oh, you go see someone at the music like venue. It's like, oh, everyone's like, oh, Kessler Theater, or like see someone at the movie theater, Texas Theater. Or you go down to the coffee shop. Sometimes now there's more, but there used to be like Davis Street or something. Like it was like. Do what? So many coffee shops? Yeah.
And they're all good.
They're all great. No, we love coffee. We love coffee.
It's a full-time job pressure. Going to all of them. Saying hi to all of them.
But there's that kind of feel. But yeah, what drew you to Oak Cliff? Or how you've been here for a few years now and you just love it? Or what's it like?
I mentioned when I joined the Kessler team, I had been doing some freelance work with a friend of mine, and she was from Oak Cliff originally. Actually, she lives in Austin and started a rum distillery. So
that's cool.
She's from Oak Cliff originally, so Island Getaway Rum is her rum brand. She's from Oak Cliff girl, but
okay, I'll have to get her on.
And so she's like, I was on the track to probably getting divorced. But anyways, we went to Cafe Veracruz for lunch and had margaritas. And I don't know if you've had their margaritas.
Doug, have you?
Veracruz, is that
in Bishop parts?
At the corner? I have.
I haven't had the margaritas. I need to go try that.
Buckle up.
I've only been like once or twice, maybe.
They're delicious, but buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up.
So
that's like glorious margaritas.
So shortly after that, I got separated and divorced and started working for the Kessler and moved to Oak Cliff.
There you go. There's the story.
But I fell in love with it because I grew up in the suburbs in Bedford. Okay, so between Dallas and Fort Worth. So I've been in DFW my whole life, but I had lived in Fort Worth, worked in Sundance Square. I had went to school up in Richardson, UTD. I lived in Deep Ellum. I'd kind of done all those things, and ended back kind of in the like Tarrant County suburbs, and then realized like the like embarrassment of riches we have here in Oak Cliff, because I can feel like I live in a neighborhood. Yeah. And literally live in a regular neighborhood that doesn't feel like you're in the city, but I'm 4 miles from downtown.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yes,
because I can get an Uber to wherever I want to go. Now the problem is that you have, like, if I feel like I have to cross the river, then it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
which is funny.
Which is sometimes you feel bad about. You're like, I feel a little guilty.
It's like, we grew up like the East Dallas thing, and it was always going past 635 felt like such a barrier. And now that I'm here, it's like, it is the river. It is a barrier.
It's so sad. The river is not far. Like, it's not like we're going more than 3 miles.
It's so close. But we laugh about it all the time. We're
funny.
Like, oh, jeez. And then, and there's just always like something new opening and somewhere to go. I'm like, I can't even keep up in my own neighborhood. That's so cool.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's a good problem.
It is a good problem. But like, especially the last couple of years, it feels like there's always something new happening here, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's good.
So you've loved it here. Yeah. You're from Bedford originally, you said. How did you first get to Oak Cliff? I maybe missed that part of this.
My friend that was from here, she just took me to lunch. She took me to lunch. She was like, "Let's go." We took me to lunch, and we went and saw Bobby Patterson at the Kessler Theater around that time too. And then so what was it? TCB or TYA was his song, which is "Take Care of Business" or "Tear Your Ass." And I was like, "All right, let's." I guess I'm getting life advice now from Bobby. Thank you, Bobby Patterson. But and so shortly after that, it was like.
Yeah, that's it.
It was done.
That's awesome.
It was done. And then my husband came down here. We met a couple years after, and he came down here, and he's like, "Okay, this is cool."
Yeah,
and his my stepkids, they're grown, so he was like, I can. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's buy a house in Elmwood.
Yes.
There we go.
Elmwood, we love it. The little trail and all that. It's great.
It's a beautiful little place to live.
This is random, but Elmwood Recording, have you got connected with those guys at all? Or
I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't. I know of it, and I've heard the names. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know the names of the folks.
Alex, I think, is it Bowl or something like that? But we're gonna have him on the show soon, which is gonna be fun.
He's coming out.
I guess they've recorded quite a bit, and it's like just in the downtown area. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and there's a couple really cool hidden things. Like I know that's there, and like people don't. I mean, not saying people don't know, because obviously people that need to use it do. But I think that even some of us in the community forget that that's there. There's a tattoo shop that's does epic work. Like it's just all this stuff that's like right here. And
tattoos. You gotta give us some stories. You gotta give us some stories.
Oh no, I just keep adding more.
Once you start, you don't stop.
You start with one with a cool story, and then you just keep going. And then
y'all, Elmwood. Awesome. I feel like the downtown Elmwood, which is a funny thing to say, but it is a downtown. There's like 50 little shops, buildings down there.
If you were out in rural Texas, that would be a hardcore downtown.
I think you're right. Actually,
I'm just saying, like,
that's very true.
Hardcore downtown.
Yeah, serious.
I just think it's so fun to see it start to develop.
Oh yeah,
with I mean Herbie's and B-side and Slow and Steady. And you just have all these new. I can't wait to see what's going to be like in 10 years.
Lodge. Just right there. It's been there forever. It's like it's massively in the middle.
It is. It's a big building.
What's happening there?
Who knows?
I know. Who knows?
I think that's the whole point.
Elmwood Recording. Like literally,
awesome.
Elmwood Recording. Someone was saying they had like Grammy award stuff happening through this thing, and like
100%.
again, know people. Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay. Well, I want to switch gears back to music for a second.
Yeah.
What has been going on in the live music world the last few years? Did you feel like post-pandemic, what kind of changes have you seen with artists and maybe the way that they operate and things that have just changed in the industry in general? Because I imagine, obviously, COVID, major disruption.
Right.
What does it look like since then?
I think that this is just something across the board, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's just post-pandemic, but I think it's just a reality is that everything is a tiny bit more expensive than it was 5-10 years ago, whatever you want to,
For sure.
So as you see that, travel specifically is what I would be referencing, right? So artists have to make concerted decisions if they're going to go tour solo or with a band, because that costs real money. And then we have to look at how many people can we fit in the room, what makes sense for everybody, and what layout then, and then you get into ticketing and those concepts. So there's a lot of things that have to be considered that are constantly changing, I would say, in all of those components. I think that artists have had to make the biggest transition in recent years, and that is primarily because of the change in how we all consume music. Number one is that you buy a song or you're streaming and you're not buying anything, and they're dependent on royalties. If they're not getting royalties because you're not buying, I mean, yes, vinyl has its own resurgence.
Sure, but it's probably not a big enough resurgence to really. I mean, like,
the same.
For all
it's not
artists.
like where everybody would buy a stack of CDs.
Exactly.
It's a little different. So that's different. I think that people have had to reacclimate in some ways to consuming entertainment in a social setting. I think we're back to that.
Sure.
I don't think that's a thing now, but I think that people had to reassess it. And I think that there are some generational gap where people didn't do that at the formative years when you would go see live music.
That's really interesting. Like there was a generation that during
it was only a year, but it's still like affected like when you would have gone out and done that. And then just everything's so online now.
Sure. Like, that's true. I can imagine social media as a thing has definitely impacted musicians.
I personally, and I won't spend long on it, but I do believe my tiny soapbox about the importance of live music.
Let's hear it.
So I like to preach this every once in a while, not only to my team, but to anybody that will listen. But I went to my first concert. One was like, I saw Garth Brooks at the old stadium, forever ago.
That's your first concert?
Yeah, at the old Texas Stadium. And then my first rock show was the Toadies. With Brutal Juice and Civ.
That's great.
Later on, I got to open for Brutal Juice, so I kind of had a full circle.
Wow.
But what those taught me was the importance of gathering. And now those were bigger concerts. A little bit after that, I went to my first punk rock show at the Orbit Room in Evelyn with my little friends and my little Mohawks and my little station wagon, because that's, of course, what you drove as a 16-year-old punk rock kid. And from the suburbs, we had to have a station wagon.
That's
it was
awesome.
a rule. So we would go to that, and then you got this feeling of community in a shared experience that you cannot get from anything else by my measure. And you are consuming this experience and this performance and this art, even if they're just screaming some crazy stuff into a microphone together. Even if it's silly, even if it's not some serious, like, orchestral moment. And being able to have that shared experience and look around and see who's having that with you is something super special. And I think it's just really important. And I know not everybody's into live music. Everybody's kind of into live music. They just don't know it. But they just got to find the right thing for them. Like, I know I'm not good at sitting down at concerts, so I'll be standing in the back and I'll wander around a lot. That's just me. But I'm still there and I'm watching the people consume it, and I'm watching the band perform it, and I'm seeing what's happening. Yeah. And so I think that component is just I think it's so key culturally for us, but not even about the culture of it. I think it's about connectivity between people.
Yeah, interesting. I couldn't agree more. I feel like if people are in Oak Cliff, they just need to get down to the Kessler and experience this because it's one of those things where it takes you out of your like body for a bit or your moment for your mind for a bit, and you get to kind of just, I don't know, be together in this thing.
With your neighbors, for the most part. I mean, it's basically just Oak Cliff people
and
there.
you're not arguing with people. You're not judging people. You're just sitting there consuming this. You're all having a shared moment, no matter what about your background or who or what or anything else. That's just cool.
And that's like in such this online world. Not that like we hate the online world.
I've spent too much time on there too.
But it is like I was hearing something the other day about how watching like kids are watching like used to watch TV like together and stuff, and now people are just like streaming on their phones or whatever and different things. It's like less of a communal thing, and it's like music also can be so individual sometimes, but when you get into that moment that is communal, there's something special to it, and it brings you together, which is I love hearing that. That's awesome.
So that's
a good soapbox.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm always like, I got to take both my younger siblings to their first shows. Little things like that. It's just kind of cool. They're all, everybody's grown now, but
no, it's memories too. Like
that was my first show. Was with this guy.
Yeah,
the Shins.
That was a good one.
Palladium Ball. Was it Palladium Ballroom?
Yeah, that's what it was called. Playing ball.
Smelled weed for the first time. I was like, what is that? Yeah. Doug's like, we'll talk about it later. I was like, all right, cool. What was your first show? You remember?
Oh, dude, it was like DC Talk. It was like a Christian.
I love it.
Was that at Six Flags by chance? Because I know they played there too.
No, this is embarrassing. It was Prestonwood Bible Church,
like
way up north. No, but when I think there are so many.
I'm sorry to ask you that.
No, it's hilarious. Shins is an awesome first one.
I know, it was a great show.
No, I think there's so many like fun memories too. Like you're talking about this communal aspect. I'm like, the John Baptiste one comes to mind, but like. We at Good Records, I picked up a record once and I got a free ticket, and it was Modest Yahoo and Flaming Lips, and I was like, what a random.
Yeah.
It was looking at the people that were there, but then also the show itself was so different, and I don't know, I just loved it. It puts different people together and random stuff together. It's just awesome. Yeah, special.
I always said I'd rather go to a show for a band I've never heard of, and just see what's happening, as opposed to like questionably like buying like an album I might like one song off of sometimes, which sounds terrible. And please buy music and support artists. But that's kind of like been my take. I'm like, I'll go check it out. I don't know. Sounds interesting.
The Kesslers opened me up to that more, where I'm like, I love going to see shows there. Maybe I know one song from this band. I'm going to go. Yeah, maybe.
Like sometimes I don't even know it, and you're like, this is...
Which I would have never used to do that, done that. But I think, like you said earlier, the Kessler has earned so much trust. Yeah. Because even like with the Black Pumas, we went and saw them pre-awards that they won, and it was... And then they like had this.
We like kind of knew one song. Yeah, it was electric.
It was like one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And then they came back after winning awards, and I was like, oh, this is what the Kessler does. Like they can bring this kind of experience to you here in Oak Cliff. So
we try.
That's awesome. You do great.
That's awesome. Keep it up.
Well, I know we're wrapping up, but is there anything like with Kessler Presents that's coming in the future that you want to highlight, or anything Kessler in general that people should be made aware of like or ways for people to check out? Obviously go to see a show, but
go see a show, go see bring a friend and go see a show. It's a good excuse to go out, something to go do, support artists, and support people that present the arts, because we have a team too, at the venue. And so I think that'd be my biggest takeaway. I think I would, and I know it's on the edge of Oak Cliff, so I'm going to say it though, if you haven't been to the Longhorn Ballroom yet,
do it. Yeah,
please go check it out. We have we kind of call a beer in hand museum, if you will, where you can walk through and see this amazing memorabilia from all these artists that played there before. It's top notch. It's not chintzy. It's a beautiful installation of really cool stuff, including guitars and clothing and all kinds of things. So, and it's just part of our Dallas history.
Yeah.
So
it's awesome.
But yeah, come go see it. Just go see a show. That's what I'm gonna say.
That's it. I love it.
Sign up for some shows.
Let's do it. Diana, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for being in Elmwood and Oak Cliff and doing all this stuff. It was great.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend. And thanks so much for tuning in.